Hello everyone. Welcome to this talk, Getting Stronger with Saturn. This talk is actually a class that I taught as a part of the new Paradigm Astrology class, Getting Stronger with Saturn. This was a series of classes I taught with my colleagues in, I think, 2018, Maybe, something around then. It was just when Saturn was entering Capricorn, actually. And this video is a combination of the two classes that I taught in this series, and these classes were the final classes of this series. And these classes are really about really speaking to the essence of Saturn from a spiritual perspective. Saturn is how we can get stronger. Saturn, doing the Saturn work, is grounding. It's living this life in a good way, where we're working with form and time and space in a way that really serves our deeper spiritual growth, why we're here. So I'm excited to share this with you. This is a part of a little project that I'm doing during this Mercury retrograde at this time in January of 2022. I'm taking a lot of classes off my old platform and I'm putting them here. Some of them I'm going to continue to sell. Some of them I'm choosing to offer for free, and this is one of them. You can check out all of the classes that I'm teaching in the description below. You can check out the courses that I'm teaching, the full training programs that I'm offering. There are many valuable resources that are available and will continue to be made available on my website for those that want to study more deeply. You can also find in the description a PDF to this talk. So it seems that I apparently created a PDF when I first made this talk with summary and notes of everything that I address in this talk. So that's a really cool resource. I'm looking at it. It's 14 or something pages long. The topics that I address in this talk are rest, the relationship between Saturn and rest, the connection between Saturn and Jupiter, time, space, and karma, discipline as alignment in thought. And I also share self-affirmations for getting stronger with Saturn in our lives. I share that in the article. I'm not sure if I say that in the video as well. So I hope you enjoy this video. Once again, check out my website for more classes and opportunities to study more deeply with me. Enjoy. Welcome to the final segment of Getting Stronger with Saturn. This segment is getting stronger with Saturn in our lives. My intention in this segment is to offer a context and a framework that is easy to assimilate and integrate in our own lives. So in part, I'll be reviewing many of the teachings that we've received over the past 2 months, sharing some new insights. And I'll be segueing into some teachings on the current transits, what's happening over the next couple years, and again, how can we really embrace this time with maximum consciousness and presence? So I'm going to start off with a little song. This is La Promesa by Shimshai.
Cuando todo cual tenemos es lo que necesitamos, y el amor de Dios siempre estará para hacer su trabajo y vivir con la paz. Que la promesa del cielo esté contigo, que la promesa del cielo esté contigo. Cuando todo lo que tenemos es lo que necesitamos, y el amor de Dios siempre estará para hacer su trabajo y vivir con la paz. Que la promesa del cielo esté contigo, que la promesa del cielo esté contigo, que la promesa del cielo esté contigo, que la promesa del cielo esté contigo. For when all we have is all we need, and the love of the Lord shall forever be, to do promise of heaven may be with thee, that the promise of heaven may be with thee. For when all we have is all we need, and the love of the Lord shall forever be, to do thy work and to live in peace, that the promise of heaven may be with thee, that the promise of heaven may be with thee, that the promise of heaven may be with thee, that the promise of heaven may be with thee.
And so as I progress in this segment, you'll come to understand why I chose that song. There are no assignments in this segment. Rather, I will be offering affirmations and insight that I wish to offer as something we can come back to, something we can refer to remind us of this path. The core essence of my teaching today is about alignment. In this world, and we've learned about this, especially during this talks on shame and deconditioning, there is such a cultural emphasis on doing, on producing, on creating, on establishing success in this world. And socially, we're really judged and we define ourselves according to that. But I want to start off this talk by speaking about this other aspect of Saturn, a very little known aspect of Saturn. And this is the archetype of rest, of stillness. Recently, my friend contacted me. He's a Jewish professor, and he's teaching a class in Berkeley on the Sabbath. And he teaches a lot of scholastic Jewish topics. And he learned in his research that Shabbos, the Sabbath, corresponds to the planet of Saturn. And he knows that I'm a Jewish astrologer, so he got in touch with me. And in fact, when I first began studying astrology, the first place I went were the Jewish texts. So there's a man called Ibn Ezra. He was a Kabbalist, an astrologer, and a great commentary on Torah. And I remember him speaking about these things, and he in fact associates Saturn, the planet Saturn, with the weekly Jewish holiday of Shabbat. So my friend asked me, what's the connection? Can you teach me something? So I looked inside. And here's an insight that I have. First, what is Shabbos? I should offer this framework for you. Shabbos happens every week, Friday night to Saturday night, so it's all of Saturday. And in the Torah, it's kol melecha avodah lo ta'asu. All work you shall not do. There's a prohibition on Shabbos from doing any kind of work. You can't build, you can't accomplish, you can't succeed in anything. It's a day of rest. Minuchat shalom v'shalva hashket b'vetach, a day of peace, tranquility, rest, stillness. And on Shabbos, we celebrate. We're with our family, we sleep a lot, we eat meals, we pray. There's no objective, there's no actual agenda. So we can ask, how is Shabbos in any way at all connected with Saturn? What's the connection? Because we think of Saturn as work, accomplishment, building. And there's a great truth in this. We may have learned that Saturn and Capricorn corresponds to the archetype of depression. Depression happens as a natural effect of consciousness needing to become more inverted within itself. When we become so identified with the structural reality of our lives, it's very easy to get lost in the seeming reality of things working out really well. It can be, I have my wife, my family, my children, the job, the career, the car, the 2-point whatever children, that there's a certain success relative to whatever cultural reality we're a part of. But depression happens when we find that there's actually nothing inside of it, that the space inside of the form of our life isn't filled with meaning. And if we embrace the depression, we become inward, we become self-reflective. We learn how to mope, we learn how to be quiet, to feel. And this is, of course, the Cancer polarity is emotions. It's the emotional body, and it speaks to the quality of the womb. Timothy beautifully spoke about this a couple weeks ago. But within the Saturn archetype itself is this quality of rest. And we see this everywhere in nature. There's nothing biological that in its growth process doesn't also have a period of incubation and rest and stillness. There's no such thing as constant growth. So within the phenomena of anything that structures and builds itself, there's also a condensation and a still point that happens within everything biological. So a tree will have its winter. It goes within and withdraws. The seasons have their off cycles. The body has that biologically. We have our own rhythms and cycles, and Saturn corresponds to rhythms and cycles. Life cycles, ages of becoming, and also the rhythms and cycles of our body. Ayurvedic and Taoist practitioners have mapped these cycles and these rhythms. Different times of day, different organs are phased. And so what happens on Shabbos, on the Shabbat, different pronunciations, we rest and we come to a 0 point where it's literally forbidden to even plan for the next week. And what happens, we become invigorated. There's a new moment. And one of the deepest teachings of Saturn is that quality of coming into the work that we're doing in the present moment with our full awareness, with our full presence, as opposed to rushing and being so focused on success. There's a beautiful relationship in life. It's a poetic reality to integrate and really sit with, to find this everywhere between the form and the formlessness. Consciousness, of course, is formless. Consciousness is Neptune, 12th house Pisces. It's not defined by anything at all. So consciousness inherently, truth inherently isn't limited by any particular context. And then we have Saturn, which corresponds to conditioning. But what's interesting about conditioning, and this might sound simple, but it's actually profound if you reflect on it. Everything that's conditioned, in virtue of being conditioned, means that it was at some point unconditioned. And at some point will become unconditioned as well. Meaning no form that exists is the absolute form. It became that in time. Saturn also corresponds to time and development. It has a history. And if we trace a history of everything that's crystallized, we find that it starts in the most amoebic, amorphous, gooey place of non-definition. And even before that, it was a thought. Truly, everything comes from nothing. There's a primordial source of emptiness, of nothingness, from which everything comes through. Dancing with the emptiness, building form that actually gives space for the expression of the infinite. That's the poetry, the tantra, the beauty of this human incarnation, of this physical reality. Truly, what other meaning is there in our physical reality if it becomes a false materialism that values the actual accomplishment for just its own sake? I am successful and I am a successful male with this much money, and right, so there's beauty and value in the accomplishments, but it's the emptiness, it's the spaciousness that it allows that makes our life livable. It's space. That's where the breath happens. That's where the love gets to move and dance. And there's a beautiful quote from Lao Tzu. We join spokes together in a wheel, but it is a center hole that makes the wagon move. We shape clay into a pot, but it is the emptiness inside that holds whatever we want. We hammer wood for a house, but it is the inner space that makes it livable. We work with being, but non-being is what we use. Translated by Stephen Mitchell.
It's the space between the words in the speaking, in the book that we're reading. It's the space to connect with what's wanting to be said, to feel the impulse of speech prior to the speech, to allow the receiving of it. Everything is permeated with space. And so it is the moment of pause. It is the moment of rest before doing that allows us to come into alignment. True success is not the manifestation of what we are trying to create inherently. It is the alignment with which we manifest the next step. I was listening to a teaching by spiritual teacher Adyashanti a few days ago, and he said something like he invited the listeners to consider this present moment without reference point to the past, without knowing yourself according to what was. So I'm listening to that. I like the idea, and I'm looking for my car keys, and I couldn't find my car keys. And my state of consciousness was predominantly like 95% oriented towards, I need to find my car keys. There was a lot of stress. I was wanting to find my car keys. And in that state of consciousness, there really wasn't a lot of space for breath, for presence, for embodiment, because it was all about it kind of hastily, like I just wanted to move on with my life. I wanted to accomplish this thing that I wanted to do, which is to get out of the house. But I heard the teaching and I know how life works, so I stopped. And I just stopped. I let the experience of frustration just be an observation. I noticed it's there and I stopped, just almost giving it a shot. Because when we're in that state of compulsive doing, we don't really believe that anything else will work. So we just gotta like listen to the part of ourselves that's suggesting just try it and see what happens. So I did, and literally in the moment of stopping, in the moment of giving myself the opportunity for rest, without any pause, there was a space and the thought said, kitchen counter. You brought your bags in, kitchen counter. And I'm like, oh yeah, I brought my bags into the kitchen before. The keys are probably in the kitchen, and for that matter, there's also food in the kitchen. And of course, that's where the keys were. I'm humbled and astounded by the profundity of this simple relationship between form and formless. So I'll be speaking a lot about my own chart as we go along, and in the PDF enclosed, we have my chart included as well. I have Saturn in Scorpio in the second house. So this archetype corresponds to second house survival. When I speak about gravity, that's a Saturn keyword. Gravity is the default. It's the thermostat of our consciousness. It's where we will land default. Unless there's something else that is considerably redirecting our attention, the gravity of our consciousness is where we tend to be conditioned towards thought. So for me, this has a lot to do with orienting around survival, caring for basic needs, necessities. And the Saturn work would be really introspecting, reflecting on how can I care for my physical reality in a way that is in alignment. So there are many lessons throughout my journey of Scorpio second house, both letting go of the structural reality that I was identified with so that I can create a clearer and more empowered self-definition to claim and own and come into my own mastery in defining how I am to live in this body. I have had many lives as a monk, as an ascetic, as full-on denying my physical reality. And so the Saturn Scorpio second house has been, I know how to survive with very little. I know how to shed myself, Scorpio, of the density of physical reality and get by with just what I need. And there's definitely been a lot of trauma in past lives for me, where I've been attached to I valued my money, my riches, my physical strength, my body, my attractiveness, and where I've lost it, where there's been physical and sexual violation, where I've lost possessions, and my self-esteem was deeply affected by that. And so what happens with Saturn anywhere is we develop a confidence in ourselves a trust in ourselves to really build and define our lives from the inside out. For me, Saturn Scorpio second house, this has a lot to do with building my own self-confidence in my soul. Defining my own physical reality according to my eternal empowerment, which says I am able to live here. I am able to do what I need to be comfortable, to give myself what I need. And there's this piece with Saturn relative to social conditioning and judgment, where if we become so oriented towards the physical parameters of our life, if our gravity is like, well, I just need, to have my basic needs met. And if I have a home, and if I'm making money, it doesn't matter whether I'm really enjoying it. I will feel secure because I have these things that I am identified with having. If we're so identified with the outer shell, it creates a repressive reality where by necessity, we'll have to find an outlet, we'll have to find a way to actually give ourselves the spaciousness, the softness, the pleasure. Second house is pleasure, it's comfort. It's not just black and white survival. Black and white survival is simple. Food, water, shelter. I mean, simple in terms of it's not inherently a difficult thing for me to wrap my mind around. But comfort and pleasure, that's a little more abstract. That takes a little more getting to know myself. And so I've had a lot of experiences in this lifetime or choosing ways of living where I judged comfort, Saturn, second house. I judged attachment to comfort, Scorpio, second house, being free of it. But then, of course, there's this deep part of me that, and this is within my soul, that wants to be fully grounded here, that wants to feel fully landed, that wants to breathe with the earth, wants to feel the sensuality of life coursing through me. And so if that's repressed, it creates this extreme of going from asceticism to indulgence. So there's a time in my life, and you can see the Saturn and Scorpio in the second, relative to all of my Sagittarius, South Node in the third house. I've been very oriented to define my physical reality according to belief systems and constructs that I can convince myself of. So when I was in high school, I was a very religious Orthodox Jew. I was devout. I was Saturn disciplined. I knew I wanted to wake up for prayers in the morning. So I would set my clock and I would get to sleep early. So I would wake up early to do the prayer. I would pray 3 times a day. I would always find a congregation. I was following the rules of Judaism. It was my life. I was safe in that place. In a sense, everything was provided for so long as my identity had so long as there was a need to maintain an identification with that paradigm. As I began questioning those beliefs and those ideas, those constructs, the discipline waned. And it was hard. I turned to rabbis. Rabbi, I'm thinking about sex and I'm not wanting to pray as much, but I'm making myself do it. I'm not sleeping, but it's getting hard. And they would say, learn more Torah. Repress, deny, don't go into those indulgences. Study more, study more, study more. And that's that patriarchal Saturn judgment. The flesh is bad, it's wrong, it's a sin that'll take you away from God, from Goddess. So I did that, but it didn't work. It didn't get me very far. And in time, I began rebelling. This is a Saturn thing. When we are holding to the rules so strongly, we will rebel. But if we're ashamed of it, we're not going to be necessarily open about it, especially if it's in Scorpio. So I developed a very secretive sexual life, full of shame, full of trauma, very, very heavy, very difficult, very grief-stricken. And my life was very much polarized. Now, take this later in my life. I've lived in an ashram in this lifetime, definitely in the past as well. I've taken this orientation towards, let me find a belief system to fall into, something that I can hold on to that will make me feel safe, that will tell me, what do I do with this body? What do I do with my sexuality, with my desires? What do I do with it? What's the right way? And for so many people, it is relevant, it is appropriate to turn towards authorities who will say, here are the rules, here are the right ways to live in this world. And pretty much maybe 70% of the planet orients in that way. There's an underlying belief, I don't have the ability to know what is inherently right and wrong. I would argue it's not true, and that it's part of our social conditioning. But, where people are at, it is appropriate for them. So we have a lot of teachers out there and a lot of people that are conditioned to believe, I need to turn towards something outside of myself to know what's right, to know what's wrong. And that's helpful to a point, but at a certain point, psychically on our journey, we have to find out for ourselves. We have to really, really find out for ourselves. So what created security for me in going to these different paths, and I've walked many paths, many teachers, many spiritual practices, there was always a sense of, I know what to do now. So long as I was able to convince myself that this path was right for me, that I needed it, I was able to stay disciplined. I was able to meditate for many hours a day, keep my mind focused, all those kinds of things. Interestingly, I found out of the ashram in my day-to-day life, there being such a duality where I would cyclically get to places of not meditating at all, not having any practice or discipline. And on my growth journey, I've often judged that as I should sit longer. I should have more of a practice. The shoulds, the judgments. And I'm still on my journey, but I want to share with you what I've come to learn, and I feel this is a very wise and important facet of Saturn. At this time in my life, I don't have a daily practice. I don't have any consistency in terms of what I do with practicing. There isn't a belief system that says you have to do this every day. Because what I've actually begun focusing on more is this energy of alignment. If I'm called to build and create something in my life, to participate in this course, to create a video, to do a session, to work on my health, then I might want to prepare myself. I might be drawn towards certain practices. But it's in silence that I connect with my caring of life, my intention. What calls me to living here? What calls me to actually participate with life? And it's interesting because a joyful state of mind is what brings us to create art. A meditative state of mind will wish to meditate. We come into alignment with our goals, with where we're trying to go, and then we go there. It's a very simple construct. There was once a squirrel that had this wonderful idea to create a business. He basically saw that all the squirrels were digging holes and, burying their acorns, but he thought, if I have a business where I dig holes for them, it'll save everyone time. They can give me an acorn fee. I'll have all the acorns I need. People have more luxury time. Beautiful service, beautiful idea. He saw a need. He set himself this goal to establish it. This need, this awareness came from stillness. He wasn't looking to do something. It was an inspiration that came from nowhere. And so he started a business, built a website, invested in getting some people to work for him, and he rushed towards it. He wanted to build as many holes as he possibly could. And he hurt his back. He strained himself. As a result, he couldn't do much work, he couldn't build the holes, he couldn't pay his workers, and the whole business failed. What happened is he lost touch with his innocent, empty origins. He became so wrapped up, so identified with the success, that he forgot that it's the alignment, it's his present moment experience, how he moves himself into his work that is the essence. And we know we can have a meditation practice for 30 years. We can be doing our work. We can be successful every day, showing up, doing our routines. And that's not inherently a sign of anything meaningful at all. Because it can be a form, but the essence of the form is the emptiness inside of it. What is the space that we're allowing and breathing and opening to in the form?
and it's very possible to completely suppress the spaciousness entirely. So I want to read a beautiful quote from one of my favorite books. This is Love Without End by Glenda Green, and this is actually a conversation that she has with Jesus. This is Jesus speaking, according to this book. When you love the process of achieving, you will be less tempted to compare your accomplishment with others. Each person is working on a different schedule. Just as there are young and old in a society, there are those finishing projects and those who are just beginning. You start a project, follow it through to completion, and then start another. The fact that some people are arriving at their fulfillment ahead of you is just part of the cycle. The person laying the last brick in his masterpiece will surely experience pride in himself and elicit admiration from others. In the same neighborhood, there may be someone else laying the first brick in his future building. He feels vulnerable and insecure as he hides his meager beginning from public exposure. The two are no different. However, for they have both just laid one brick in an ongoing process of purposeful living. The act of coveting externalizes a person's motivation and removes him from this deeper understanding. Loving the process of achievement and appreciating one's own purpose is the real foundation, for love and life are a never-ending process. And another quote from Lao Tzu. Whether you go up the ladder or down it, your position is shaky. When you stand with 2 feet on the ground, you will always keep your balance. Oh, the sun's coming out, so I'm going to reposition myself. Oh, that's pretty. So, we also know that mastery is an archetype that corresponds to Saturn. And in truth, it's never really about mastery of astrology, a topic, a whatever. The heart of mastery is mastery of the present moment. What creates mastership, what brings us into the archetype, the vibration of master, is our relationship to the present moment. When we're open to learn, and there's something really humble, really simple about Saturn. If you want to achieve, let yourself not be there yet, right? If you want to wake up, let yourself not know. It's so simple. But when we become so defined by getting there, we do not allow the space for our innocent origins to always re-emerge. We lose touch with our beginning. And the way that we've lived is very much a suppression of the natural world, of course. It's very much the natural cycles of becoming are actually seen as a threat to our goals, to our aspirations, so we pour concrete over it, literally and metaphorically. There's a lot for us to learn as a human species. We're just getting started. We're going to be just getting started for a while. It's really powerful to see this about ourselves, about reacclimating ourselves to nature, reacclimating ourselves to grow and live our lives in harmony with nature, because really, it must be so that there's not a separation between the cycles within and without. So at this point, what I want to do is I want to offer some affirmations. And I really offer these as offerings for empowerment and strengthening as we continue to do this work in our life over the next couple years. My goal is to feel the alignment and strength of me doing my work each step of the way. I am not concerned with the completion of the goal, though I am working in that direction. I care most about the presence I offer to each step. I masterfully tend to my life and know it is within my domain, my sovereign control, to determine the way in which I move forward. I appreciate rest as an opportunity to return to my infinite home and to naturally gauge the next steps for me in this exciting and interesting journey. This is how I build my strength: sustainable, easy, steady, wise. Keywords for getting stronger with Saturn and Capricorn. Wisdom. Wisdom implies self-knowledge, self-reflection, alignment with clear thought as basis for action. Right action is Saturn, but beyond that is right thought. And the yogis teach that all disease in the body can be traced to
a dysfunction in the breath. And they say that breath follows thought. So to really study ourselves, to study our thoughts, to study how are we breathing, it sounds so simple, but again, it is simple. Permission. All of me is allowed to be. I build a life that acknowledges my humanity, gives space for it. There is no rush, and time is on my side. I dance with the cycles of time like I would to a song that keeps on playing. There are pauses and periods for rest. I enjoy those. Mastery of now. My mastery in any field is only the extent to which I master the art of living in the present moment. It is how I move right now that determines my success. I enjoy living now more than anything else. So what I'm going to do now is speak about the Kundalini, a little bit about how Saturn corresponds to Kundalini, and move into the transits. First, I want to sing a song. This is from my dear soul sister, Rebecca, Flower of the Water. I follow God, live in peace, speak the truth, practice forgiveness. I have dominion over my mind. I follow God, live in peace, speak the truth, practice forgiveness. I have dominion over my mind. So you can see why I'm singing these songs. Because we're coming into our own mastery. We are becoming our own authorities. And it doesn't matter if we're studying with someone else, if we're still in the student role, we're always in the student role. Our true cultivation is how we align ourselves in the present moment. So let's move into the Kundalini now. Jeff Green has a beautiful construct for explaining the chakra system, and that's enclosed in the PDF for this segment. I'm going to speak entirely about the root chakra. The root chakra in his paradigm, and this very much aligns with my own direct experience. And that's all that I really want to speak about here. The root chakra corresponds to Saturn, Uranus, and Pluto. Saturn is the outer shell. It's the structural form. Uranus breaks up that form, and then the Kundalini essence is what opens up and flows throughout our entire system when we're not identified and clenched within our physical time-space reality, which is basically a gravity that is concerned with physical time-space. By the way, concern with physical time-space can either be an identity structure that's so success-driven, or someone that's completely denying the importance of focusing on goals and isn't addressing their reality. Really, they're just two sides of the same coin. In both cases, it's not being in balance with one's physical reality. Right? Either not taking responsibility for it or over-identifying with it. But when we come into alignment with our physical reality, we settle. We can settle. For me, for example, I can feel comfortable. I actually give myself a structural reality of balance where I get to move all of my energy. I get to be circulating in a feeling of emptiness and peace. And that happens by defining what are my deepest values in life? How do I create a life that is reflective of my own truth? It's reflecting. It's really building self-knowledge over time. Wherever Saturn is in your chart, this is where we can really come into a sense of settling. That's a root chakra. It's very core. Everything's established and we can rest in that. That's an important foundation, because if we don't establish that foundation, it's actually very possible, and this is also from direct experience, to awaken the Kundalini without having established a firm ground in balance and harmony with time and space. And when that happens, it can really stress out the nervous system. We can find ourselves running a lot of energy, but actually depleting ourselves because we don't have a ground. We don't have a stable position to rest into. It's almost like getting into the formless without having allowed the form to build itself around it. You know, Saturn really speaks to the poetry of the middle way. My understanding of the middle way is this harmonious state where form and formlessness are one. It's a holding all that is in balance with itself. And there's something that gets to naturally blossom in that place. where the form and the formless are held in unity. So it's important to have that foundation. And when that foundation is really grounded, there's the opportunity for freedom, meaning there's an actual rest that happens. And no longer does consciousness need to be defined by figuring shit out. This is where we go into the Uranian levels of consciousness. So Uranus is beyond form, time, and space. It has nothing to do with structure. Thus, from a Saturnian point of view, it's actually a very difficult archetype to every archetype beyond Saturn is kind of difficult to understand and really grasp it, simply because we're mostly conditioned to know ourselves relative to what we can physically taste, hear, smell, right? Experience, Saturn. When we come into balance with that, we begin to apprehend and directly experience the larger part of what we are. And that's where we begin to see life as it actually is. We start to see that life is a reflection of inherent universal archetypes and expressions of oneness, manifesting beyond the veils of time and space. It's inherently impersonal. And that what's happening now resonates with what happened in a different lifetime. It might be the same archetype. Everything's like a tarot card manifesting itself. And that the actual program of our life isn't unfolding in time. We already are what we are, and life is already in its essence exactly what it is as it is created to be. Everything already exists. When we operate within that consciousness, there's a great curiosity and a joy and a freedom in discovering what is. And we're not needing to hide behind any kind of definition. And when that Pluto energy starts to move, it purges, gradually purges, and moves through every aspect of our own consciousness that's holding on to identity. It's a slow process, but a permeating process. And once it begins, it can get messy. But that's why doing the Saturn work is so important. Ground, rest, come into alignment. As we meet the parts of ourselves, the samskaras that are actually tight and holding on to desire, attachment, fear, possessiveness, all the different Plutonian dynamics of craving and aversion, it's very easy to get lost and stuck in that realm and to lose our alignment. But this path is opening up to the discomfort and finding our breath in that. That's the Tantra, that's the poetry of this whole journey. And of course, we flow with it. We experience what it's like to come out of alignment and then to come back into source, to come back into this moment. But this is what allows this Pluto energy, this Kundalini energy to flow through us. And then our third eye can open. And what I'm learning on my journey is a direct correlation between the root chakra and the third eye. It's like a direct in-the-moment experience. And the story I shared about the keys is actually a good example of that. There is direct, clear perception of what is when there's a settling, root chakra, resting. Energy allows, and then there's insight. It happens at the same moment. This is true in our relationships with other people, whether it's a trigger or intense desire. This is true with our agendas, with our work, with everything that we want to accomplish in life. So, right now, Saturn in Capricorn is moving towards an alignment with Pluto. We've heard about Pluto in Capricorn before, most likely. It's been happening for a while. It's an important transit. Pluto in Capricorn speaks to Pluto, the evolution, the transmutation of the physical structural realities that we've been living in. It says that everything formed has to go. By the way, Satchidananda had a beautiful quote. He said, "You were born fine, but you defined, now you must refine." Everything that's defined is going to become unfound, unfinded. Even our self-constructs, our own social conditioning, everything's falling. Everything is needing to be composted. And Pluto is compost. So as Saturn moves towards Pluto, it's called a Balsamic Conjunction, or Balsamic phase. This is the last 45 degrees before a conjunction. And during these last 45 degrees, it's very Piscean. Energy's dissolving, it's falling away, it's becoming more yin, it's returning to center. Everything that's been created over the last 30-year cycle is now reaching a point of culmination. And this is a particularly potent time because it's also happening on the south node of Pluto. And this has been spoken about, so I'll just review this teaching. Every planet has a south node. And the south node of the planet represents the total conditioning of that planetary function. So Pluto in Capricorn, and the south node of Pluto being in Capricorn, moves very slow. The south nodes of the outer planets are very slow moving. So thus it represents a very collective, global, multi-generational, collective history, past. And it's literally that, it's a history. It is the total reality of patriarchy, how we've conditioned our consciousness to identify with the man-made, human-made constructs and ways of judging our own lives in relation to what is natural. Everything that we built within patriarchy. That's where Pluto is moving towards, its own south node. Saturn's going to join there. Jupiter will be there as well to expand and blow up this reality, make it more apparent for us. And then the transiting lunar south node will be joining as well. There's a lot going on, and we're building towards it over the next couple years. So what this means very clearly from an astrological perspective is we're at the foot of the mountain. We're at this time where we're beginning to enter a phase of profound deconstruction, deconditioning, and then reconnecting to a power that is more essential and true, more authentic, more aligned with our true evolutionary purpose at this time, with living in a way that is in greater harmony with natural law. There's good news here. Because this is timing, it means it is time to get stronger. It is time to come into our own power, to cultivate our mastery, to do the work that is in front of us. It can feel heavy at times. It can feel burdensome. But remember that it's not the work, it's not the doing that is the essence, it's your relationship to it. And so where there's a tendency to move with this feeling of burden, that right there, that's a place that we're actually bringing more awareness. So that we can actually say, how can I come into alignment to do this work, to step forward on my path and be healthy? And it might feel like there's like a big hobgoblin bleh of entanglements and confusions and responsibilities and roles. But to stay present with the process, life is helping us, time is on our side. That's an important Saturn teaching. And time is on our side. And if we will allow it, we will grow and evolve and discover ourselves within time, over time. So the potential bad news is if we're resisting the evolutionary necessity, it can be chaotic. There can be a lot of upheaval. And sometimes that has to happen, right? A child born without a limb doesn't know why they were maybe born without a limb. We don't always understand the karma that's arising for us. We're not fully aware of the total karmic reality that we're carrying. But it's never about punishment. It's an important thing to understand about karma. It's not about you did this, now you're getting this done. Karma reflects consciousness. And so if there's a place where we are not acting in alignment with all that we are, if we're denying a part of ourself, we're going to, by necessity, magnify into our own lives, magnetize an experience that will bring us into a reflection of exactly what has been denied. It's just so we can become whole. Consciousness is wanting to become whole. It's wanting to know itself as whole. So it's always going to create polarized experiences for itself to reflect where there has been denial of the whole. That's it. There's no punishment involved. And so when karma nips us in the butt, trust it, honor it, respect it. It's actually a gift. Think of it this way. When things happen in our life as events, it's tangible, it's in our face, it's practical, we can work with it. It's like when we get sick, when we break a fever, it's actually not that we got sick, it's that something's actually coming through us, we don't feel good, because it's actually being released. So with Pluto, Saturn right now, there is a releasing that is possible. We can really do some great healing. And again, we are where we need to be. What's interesting is after this transit, when we come into 2021, Saturn will actually start to square Uranus and enter Aquarius. So what's the difference between Saturn in Capricorn versus Saturn in Aquarius? Saturn in Capricorn is taking responsibility to structure a life that is in consideration to one's dharma, doing one's work, coming to alignment with one's path, becoming aware of the effects that we have on the world around us, developing mastery, taking responsibility for our lives. Saturn in Aquarius, Saturn squaring Uranus and Taurus is like, okay, take that, now build a life that reflects a higher consciousness, ground and stabilize within life the new paradigm. To me, these next couple years are opening the doors. It's after the alignment with Pluto. It's after the conjunction when Saturn's in a new phase. It's a very Aries phase. It's new cycles, new developments, new unfoldings. That's when things are really, really going to get interesting. We're just getting started. And this Saturn-Uranus-Aquarius piece is going to invite a lot more ingenuity and coming together to build a life that takes the whole into consideration. And for those of us that are attuned, we're preparing the ground for that right now. And just know that the experience of the pendulum swing is so common. You know, people that are very Saturnian or Capricorn, that worked really hard or doing the right thing, they're often very sensitive to judgment because they're trying so hard to do what's right. And they're also oftentimes needing to find outlets for their pent-up energy, for their pent-up emotions, ways to access the chaos that they've denied, that they've suppressed. And so it's very natural for all of us relative to that experience to go into extremes. It's like my own practice with meditation and then periods of time of just not meditating and seeking pleasure is because I've denied comfort. So to have so much compassion for ourselves, where we see ourselves following that flow of pendulum swinging from intense effort and discipline to negligence. In fact, it's good news. It means if we can recognize where we've been a pendulum swinger, it means that balance is possible. It means, oh, there must be a place of balance. There must be a place of integration. I want to find that place. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for sharing in this journey with us. And this completes the segment, and this completes the course. And I'll see you on the other side. So much love to you.